My name is Brenda, and this is History Coles Notes. So what are Coles Notes? Coles Notes are printed guides about everything from writing a resume to explaining the meaning behind literary works. They were invented before the days of Google search and are still very popular study guides today. But why should you read a book when you can just watch a video? Almost everybody has heard the term D-Day, but what actually is it? Well, D-Day was June 6, 1944, and it was the largest water-based invasion in the history of warfare. The Allied forces used over 5,000 ships and landing crafts to move over 150,000 troops onto 5 beaches in Normandy in France. These beach landings marked the start of a very long and a very expensive campaign into northwestern Europe, which ultimately convinced the Nazi high command that their defeat was inevitable. On that day, Allied airborne forces parachuted into drop zones across northern France. Ground troops then landed on what they called 5 assault beaches, which were Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Now, by the end of this day, the Allies established their foothold along the coast and started their advance into France. But why was this so vital? This invasion drained German resources and it blocked their access to key military sites. So as you can imagine, with something this important, it took a lot of planning. Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan and his team of Canadian, British, and American officers submitted their plans for invasion in July of 1943. Although very limited planning began in 1940, detailed preparations for what they called Operation Overlord did not begin until late 1943. A command team that was led by American General Dwight D. Eisenhower was formed to plan the naval, air, and land operations. British factories increased their production of supplies and equipment to support this operation, and a substantial Canadian and American military force was moved into Europe to take part. Now, to pull this all off, an unprecedented cooperation was needed between international forces at a degree that was never done before. By 1944, over 2 million troops from over 12 countries were laying in wait in Britain to prepare for this invasion. Even though the troops were primarily from Canada and Britain and the United States, many Australian, Belgian, Czech, Dutch, French, Greek, New Zealand, Norwegian, and Polish naval, air, and ground support troops all stood together as Allied forces in this siege. Now, to give you guys an idea of just how big this was, the invasion was conducted in 2 main phases: the airborne assault and the amphibious landings. Shortly after midnight on June 6th, over 18,000 Allied paratroopers dropped into the invasion area to provide a tactical support for the infantry divisions on the beaches. Allied air forces, they flew over 14,000 defense troops to support the beach landings, and nearly 7,000 naval vessels including battleships, destroyers, minesweepers, escorts, and assault crafts moved into the coast, carrying over 132,000 ground troops to those beaches. The naval component, they also bombarded the German coastal defenses before and during the landings to provide artillery support to this invasion. Now, these guys would not have been successful if it wasn't for the members of the French resistance and the British Special Operations, who provided intelligence that helped weaken the German defenses before by committing sabotage. The Allied forces, they also pulled off some brilliant deception campaigns that helped convince the German command that the main invasion was actually landing somewhere else. Now, this resulted in the German defenses becoming weak and insufficiently manned. Now, D-Day was also possible because of the Allied forces across all fronts beforehand, and their bombing campaign, which began in 1942, weakened German industry. It forced Germany to take manpower and resources away from Normandy to defend their homeland. By the Allies securing air superiority, it also allowed them to carry out aerial reconnaissance, and that gave them vital intelligence needed for that day. Operation Overlord and D-Day did not bring an end to the World War, but it did begin the process in which victory was achieved. By the end of August of 1944, the German army was in full retreat from France, but by the following month, the Allied momentum slowed, giving the Nazis a chance to regroup. They launched a final counteroffensive that finally failed, and it drained their manpower and resources. This allowed the Allies to resume their advance towards Germany, which ultimately ended World War II. So, what does the D in D-Day actually stand for? Well, quite simply, the D stands for day. Yeah, I get it, they're kind of saying day, but historically this term is used to describe the very first day of any large military operation. So in other words, they're actually saying day one. But as a person who is part of the military community, I can tell you guys for a fact they got to make a confusing acronym for absolutely everything. So here's the thing, there actually was a whole bunch of D-Days. Since this term is used to describe day one of an operation, that the exact date is either secret or not decided upon, there historically has been a whole lot of D-Days. During this time, many people thought that soldiers serving in Italy were avoiding what they thought was real combat in France and started calling these guys D-Day dodgers, but in fact, these troops actually faced their own D-Days in many different campaigns in Italy. So what is D-Day? Well, it is a term that is still used for military operations today, but to the general public, it stands for a day where many brave souls from many different countries came together to take a stand. They ultimately defeated Nazi Germany and ended the Second World War, and for this, they never should be forgotten. Thank you guys so much for watching, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell so you can join us for more History Cool Notes and have access to all the great content that you can find on the Horrifying History channel. Also, follow us on social media to get some even more amazing content. Be the first to hear about what's coming up and have access to some awesome contests. You will find the links to our social media in our show notes. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time.